The house that I currently live in is a house I've lived in for just over 20 years. I moved to California from Washington State when I was about 10 years old, and this is the second house, or third house actually, that we've lived in, but it is obviously the house I've lived in for the longest amount of time since we've been here because the others were rentals. So this has been my permanent home for quite a while. Unfortunately, this home was not my first pick, and it was not my first pick for many reasons, which I'll get into later in other videos, but it's just a strange home. It's bizarre. There was an office that I'm currently sitting in, actually, that was built into a closet. Like, they literally built out a closet. And that's not really the weird part. At least it's not weird to me anymore. But all of the windows to that office were walled over. So when we got the house, it was just an office with no windows. Even though there were windows, like places for windows, they had been sealed over, which we thought was really bizarre. And there were just other really weird things, but anybody who is empathic or who has any kind of touch with the spiritual world, you just know when a house is off. And if you've ever had that feeling, then you know the feeling I had when I first walked into this house. But if you've ever been a child and you're in the middle of a move, you don't really exactly get the final say on the home necessarily. And to be fair, I didn't really express all of my concerns because I didn't want them to think I was crazy. So I just said, yeah, it's fine, and we bought the house. However, things started getting really, really weird as soon as we moved in, pretty much. For me, anyway. And there were a couple of instances that I will lump into one story called The Scream. Both of them had to do with EVP in a sense. One was intentional and the other was not. So, the unintentional one came first because this was kind of before I really intentionally started investigating or even knew about paranormal investigation techniques at all. I was very young, and there used to be, like, on radio shows that were sort of aimed towards a younger audience, you could call in and you could say, like, a certain thing, and then they would play that thing. So basically, you were part of a transition in between two songs, and it was just a way for kids to say they were on the radio, basically. And I didn't normally do that stuff, but I thought it was kind of cool. And so I called in and I said the line that they wanted me to say. And I thought it was really cool, so I was going to record it. And I'm going to date myself here just a little, but I was recording it onto a cassette from the radio. So, yeah. And so the thing came on and I recorded it, and then my favorite song was coming after it, so I just let it run. So my friend came over later that day and I was like, oh, this is super cool, like, let me show you. And we started listening to the tape back. And we heard what I said, but in the place of the song, there was just this woman hysterically screaming. And it sounded like there was fire in the background, like that crackling sort of sound, you know, like in any movie where there's somebody in a fire. But she just kept screaming over and over and over. And it was in Spanish, and it wasn't a Spanish station that I had been listening to, and at the time I didn't speak any Spanish, and so we were just really confused. Nobody in my house speaks Spanish, so we couldn't figure out what was going on. So we looked it up, and we couldn't figure out what to look up because we didn't know how to spell in Spanish, and so we had one of our friends listen to it who did speak Spanish. And she goes, that's really bizarre, where'd you get this? So we explained the situation to her, and she said, that's very strange, because this woman is screaming, my children, over and over. And there were other things that she said, apparently, like, save the kids, or save the children, my children are inside. And this went on for basically the duration of the song, and then the tape just cut off. I don't have that tape anymore, because we got rid of all of our cassettes. I don't know where that thing is. I might still have it somewhere, I don't know. but I'm not sure how I would get it into a digital format. But if I find it, I will let you guys know and I will play it for you. But that was, geez, I don't know, about 18 years ago, so I don't know where it would be now. But it was super, super bizarre, and I've really never forgotten it. It's still pretty chilling to me to this day. So as the years went on, this was fast forward, oh, I don't know, quite a few years, because I was in college, and weird things had been happening in the house. And I thought, you know what? By this point, I was aware of like ghost hunters and the show, and I knew about EVPs. So I thought, you know what? I had this little like handheld digital recorder that I used for class. And I thought, you know what? I'm just gonna record, ask some questions before I run to class, and I'll listen to it on the way there, because I knew I was probably gonna record over that space because it didn't have a ton of space on it. But I just wanted to hear what it would say. I wasn't expecting anything. And so I just asked some questions like, who are you? Why are you here? You know, the standard things that, you know, young people who are dumb walk around their house and ask, you know, not who are dumb, but I felt dumb doing it. Anybody who's ever done an EVP session by themselves, you know what I'm talking about. You feel like an idiot, but I probably could have asked more productive questions was my point. But anyhow, got in the car and I was on my way to class, and I could hear myself obviously, like, you know, asking these questions. And it was after the last question, I don't remember what it was, but I just heard this horrific scream, like someone just screaming bloody murder. I almost went off the road. I was so shocked. It was so loud. It was louder than my voice. And I thought, this is so bizarre. And so I was kind of terrified and kind of excited at the same time. And so I ran to show my friend that I went to class with, because she was into the paranormal and stuff like that too. And so I went and I showed her, and when we played it back, there was nothing there. She believed me, thankfully. But I never really told anyone else about it, because what's the point if it's not there anymore? And people have tried to explain to me that I'm wrong a number of times. I've heard maybe it was somebody outside the car, maybe it was this, maybe it was that, but I was on basically like a highway, so there was really it wasn't like I was sitting at a stoplight. Like, there was no way for anything outside the car to make that noise. It was coming from the tape recorder. And I just thought that was super bizarre. And there's a third that I just remembered. There's a third scream that I'll lump into this story, that happened as well. And this kind of gets into one of my let's not meet stories, but I'm going to save that for another video. But suffice it to say, I think I've mentioned this before, that my house sort of backs up to a military base, and something really terrible happened at the military base, and involving one of my friends, and I was kind of messed up about it at the time. And I was thinking about this, and I just went outside to kind of, I don't know, look at the stars and contemplate life. You know how you do when you're kind of upset about something. So I went outside and I was just sort of looking around, and all of a sudden from the base I hear this like horrific male scream, and I kind of like got on a step stool to look over to see if, because you can kind of see across, it's not like illegal to do or anything. I just, you know, I can go on the base, obviously. I just like looked over, and I couldn't really see anything, and there was, you know, no training exercises going on, no like anything like that. And it sounded, I don't know, like, because sometimes they go out and they do exercises and they kind of yell, you know, like standard military stuff, like left, right, left kind of stuff, but not that. And, but it wasn't like that. It was just a single solitary, like, scream, like maybe someone had gotten stabbed or something like that. So, I was kind of concerned about it. So the next day I called the base and I just said, hey, I heard this really weird screaming last night coming from the base. I just wanted to see if anything had happened, or like if you're missing anybody, you know, because I didn't know what had happened. And they basically said, no, everybody, like, nothing happened. We weren't doing any drills. We weren't doing any training. Weren't doing anything like that. Like, it was quiet all night, so, like, thanks for your concern, but nothing to worry about. And I'm sure, like, a lot of people say, oh, it was a coyote or it was a fox. Like, I know what they sound like, and it wasn't either of those. So, I don't know, it was just a really strange experience. And, yeah, there's been 3 stories of screams, I guess. And, yeah, so I just thought that those were pretty creepy, and I wanted to lead with those. Now, this story is one of the strangest ones on the list. Actually, it's one of the strangest things I've ever experienced. And while noises and things like that can sometimes be explained away, this is something that I will never figure out. So if you guys think you can help out, by all means, let me know. So it was a hot summer day in the middle of summer in California, Southern California. So it was like in the hundreds. It was really, really almost uncharacteristically hot because we're technically in the coastal zone because we live, as the bird flies, maybe a mile and a half from the beach, or as the crow flies, whatever, Raven. So we live pretty close to the beach. And so we tend to get slightly cooler temperatures than they get like inland and obviously in the desert and things like that. But it was uncharacteristically hot. And we had all the screen doors open and everything. And there was a nice cross breeze, so we had all our windows open. So I was home alone and I was recovering from something. And I can't remember what it was. I just remember I was sick. But I wasn't like hallucinating type sick. It was like bronchitis or something, knowing me. And, so I was just watching TV, enjoying summer, kind of glad I didn't have to go to class, and just trying to get over this like horrific bronchitis that I had had. And, so I remembered that I needed to unload the dishwasher. And that's like my least favorite thing in the world to do, but I had put it off long enough and I was like, all right, I'm going to go in and unload the dishwasher. So I opened the dishwasher and it was still really, really hot. So I decided that I was going to let it cool off for a little bit before I went and unloaded everything because, you know, that's like gross. It was already in the hundreds. I wasn't going to stand there over a hot dishwasher and unload it. So I was like, no thank you, that can cool down. So at the time we had kind of like it wasn't linoleum, but it was this sort of wood, like, I don't know, it was like a tile-ish thing, but it was like linoleum. It was linoleum-ish, so it had that same sort of texture where it was kind of sticky, almost, like if you walk on it with bare feet, it makes that sort of like stick sound when you walk. So, I was sitting on the couch, and the couch, I should probably explain this, the couch, at the time, my back would have been to the wall where the oven is, and then at a right angle to the oven would be the counter where, like, I would unload everything, where our main cupboards are. So, I was sitting there and I heard this, like, sticking sound, and I thought, well, that's kind of weird. And I do have a dog, and it didn't sound like her nails, but at the time I was like, oh, you know what, it's probably just my dog. And so I didn't really think anything of it. So I sat there for a little bit longer. I had told myself at the end of this episode, I'm going to go unload the dishwasher and stop procrastinating. And, so I did that. I went in, I put everything away in the cupboard, closed the dishwasher, was happy to have it done, and that was that. So I went back and sat on the couch and turned the TV back on, and my dog was laying across the room from me on her, like, cushion, so I knew it wasn't the dog this time. And it got really cold. Like, it felt like a 50 or 60 degree day, like really, really, really cold. It was in the hundreds, so there was like no reason for it to be this cold, but all of a sudden it just got really cold, and my dog kind of looked up at me like, what in the world is going on? Like, something had kind of spooked her, and she looked into the kitchen because there's like a little, there's not a door, but there's just sort of like a little entryway between the kitchen and the room that I was in, just like a pass through. And she kind of looked that way, and I heard that same sticking sound. And at first I was like by that point I kind of was just aware my house was weird, so I honestly didn't really think anything of it. It was a little creepy, but that was it. And then I started to hear cupboards. And I was like, okay, this is bizarre. So I sat there for probably, it felt like an hour, but it was probably only 4 minutes or so, 4 or 5 minutes, that I sat there listening to this clamoring in the kitchen, and by that point I thought someone has broken in because all the screens are open. So I wasn't even thinking about anything paranormal. I was like, how am I going to get to the bat in time, because I had a bat in my room, so I was like, well, I'll go at this person with a bat. But I fully was convinced that there was a human being in my house. So I thought, you know what, I'm just going to walk in there, ask them what they're doing, and hopefully I can get to the knife drawer in time. So as I made this decision, I stood up, and the second I stood up, it went back to being hot, and I didn't feel anything weird or hear any sounds whatsoever. And I thought, that is really bizarre. I almost sat back down, but then I thought, well, I should go check it out anyway. So I went into the kitchen, and every single piece of plasticware that we owned, was out, neatly organized on the counter. I rebuke, is all I'm saying. I never told anybody about it at my house because they would have thought I was nuts. I have no idea what happened, and I can't explain it to this day, and every time I think about it, it gives me the chills. So yeah, if you guys have an explanation for that, let me know. Okay, so there has been quite a lot of poltergeist activity in my house. Unfortunately, it usually only happens when I'm home alone. But twice it happened when other people were in the house. So I thought I would share those experiences with you, since they are the two that stick out in my mind the most. Actually, one I was home alone, and then the other one I was not home alone, but these are the two major ones that still definitely give me the shivers to this day. So the first one, I was home with my mom. I think my dad was at work. I think he was still commuting to LA at the time. And I was just getting ready in the morning in the bathroom, and we had this glass, sort of crystal glass, heart dish that sat on sort of the tank of the toilet. You know how sometimes people put decorative things back there or whatever. And it had some seashells and just some memorabilia, and it was a really special dish to my mom in particular. And it had been just something, one of those things that you just grow up with and you just always expect it to be in your house, So it was sitting there, and I was brushing my teeth, and I just got that weird sort of spidey sense that you get when something weird's gonna happen, and I was like, oh, that's kind of odd. But I didn't think anything of it. I kept brushing my teeth, and all of a sudden, just in an instant, in my head it's like slow motion, but in an instant, this thing flew across the bathroom and smashed on the wall on the other side. And I mean, obviously I was totally freaked out, but at the same time I was like, my mom's gonna kill me because she's gonna think this was me, So she runs in because she thought I had fallen or something, something bad had happened. And she runs in and she's like, what happened? And I must have been just a sheet. I don't know what my face looked like because I was just staring at this pile of glass. And I don't mean that it slipped off the edge. The toilet was on one side of our bathroom, the wall's on the other, and it flew across and shattered. It was the weirdest thing I've ever experienced, one of anyway. And my mom came in and she kind of looked at me and then looked at it, and she knows I'm not the type to just throw something valuable like that across the room, so but also the way that it fell, I think it was pretty obvious that it had come directly from the other side of the room, and there's no way to throw anything unless you batted it off like a cat, but you'd have to have a pretty good aim. There's really no explanation for the motion that thing made. So my mom just looked at me, and I was like, I don't know what happened, I didn't do it. And I think she believed me because A, like I said, I'm not the type of person to do that, like to throw valuable things across the room. Like, that would be random. But I think she saw the look on my face too, and she could tell I was like genuinely horrified. And we just never really talked about it after that. She still doesn't believe me that the house is haunted. But yeah, we never talked about it after that. But it was just sort of one of those things where like everybody in the situation knew that we could not explain that. So that was really scary. The second thing that happened was that I was home alone and I was playing my piano. And it's hard to explain the setup of our house because it's kind of weird, but when you walk in the door, like the front door, immediately there's a long like hallway basically, with mirrors on the left side. Yeah, and it's wonderful in this house, let me tell you. So, a bunch of mirrors, and then there's like a doorway right to the left that leads to the garage. And then immediately to the right is like a living room. And it's sort of an odd shape, but like my piano, the keys of the piano face the garage door. Then there's like a dining room and then the kitchen and stuff. So it's really hard to explain, but it's basically a long hallway that's like open on one side to the majority of the house. So yeah. So I was home alone and I was playing the piano and I heard rustling in the garage, and I thought, well, it's not really that strange because, I don't know, rats, like whatever. I just thought, maybe it was an animal or something like that. So I kept playing and I heard what sounded like, those like plastic balls that come with like a wiffle ball set, and if you drop them on concrete they kind of go like, there's that hollow sort of like ding 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 ding, like as they come to a stop. That's what I heard, and we don't have anything in the garage that sounds like that. So I was like, what in the world is going on? So at that point I kind of got that weird feeling, and I was like, okay. And again, I thought it was a person, so I went and got a butcher knife, as you do, because I thought somebody had broken into the garage. So I stood by the garage and kind of counted to 3, or the door, and then I flew the door open, and there was absolutely nobody there. So I turned the light on, even though it was daylight, because I thought, well, maybe somebody's hiding somewhere, like, I don't know. And way at the top of our garage, on top of this really tall cabinet thing, we had a like the lights that go on the outside of your house, like those sort of fancy ones that you put on like either side of your front door. So we had one of those in a box pushed all the way back, so you would have to be up there to get it down or shove it, for it to fall, because it was sitting way back. And I was just sort of looking around trying to figure out where this plastic ball was or who had broken into the garage. And all of a sudden this light, I don't even know how to explain the motion, but it's like it was shoved, but then it fell vertically. So like you would expect if somebody shoved a box, it would like tilt and land on its side, but it didn't. It came straight off and then fell like an elevator, essentially. And it landed vertically on the ground. And I was like, what in the world? And I thought maybe it had broken, obviously, right? Because it's glass and like fragile. So I can't remember. I think my dad had come home right after that because he had been at the hardware store or something, and I explained to him what happened, and I was like, I obviously didn't do it. Like, I'm 5'4". It's not like I got up on a ladder and just randomly shoved something off the thing, and I was like, I was sure it was broken. And so he opened it to check, and it was perfectly intact. And I mean, we're talking like, I don't know, 10 to 12 feet this thing fell, and it was just perfectly intact, like somebody had just sat it on the ground. So those are the two poltergeist activities that happened in the house that I thought were really weird, and I thought I'd share them. This is a relatively short story, but it's creepy nonetheless, so I thought I would go ahead and include it. So one day I was taking a shower in the back bathroom, and the back bathroom, the wall between Like if you're standing at the doorway looking into the bathroom, the right wall backs up to the garage. And then it's part of the master bedroom, but my mom was using the other bathroom, so I just went ahead and used that one to take a shower. So I was in the shower and I heard the phone ring, and we had a home phone at the time. And I heard the phone, by the way, in that room was basically right next to the bathroom. And so I heard someone answer the phone. Obviously, I thought it was my mom. And I heard somebody say, hello, and then say, no, gasp, and then start crying. And this woman cried and cried and cried for like a long time. And I thought, oh my gosh, like somebody that I know has died. So I hurried up, finished up my shower, got out of the shower, and ran in to find my mom. And I was like, what happened? Like, what's wrong? Is everything okay? And she just looked at me like I was crazy. And she's like, yeah, everything's fine. Why? And I said, well, because the phone rang and then you answered it and started crying. And she was like, no, it was a telemarketer. She's like, I answered it and I hung up. And I said, well, where did you answer it? And she said, well, I answered it in the kitchen, which is at the complete opposite end of the house. And I never would have been able to hear that conversation from the bathroom, especially with the shower on and being in the shower. So I always thought that that was very strange. And it's one of the shorter stories that has happened in this house, but I thought I would share it anyway. So this story is really difficult to explain because it wasn't necessarily a play-by-play, it was just sort of an experience. Like it was just a weird thing that happened, but I will try to explain it the best I know how. So at the time we had a front room. Well, we still have a front room, but right now our front room has no furniture in it because we moved all the front room furniture to the family room. But anyway, at the time, the front room had, a full room of furniture in it. And I would like to go out there and just sort of sit on the couch, look outside, just summertime, chill day kind of a thing. So I took my book that I was reading and I went and sat on the couch and I was looking outside and just sort of admiring the day because it was a really nice day, a warm day as usual in Southern California. And so I was sitting there and it got a little chilly and I thought, well, that's kind of weird. But it wasn't overly hot, so I just thought, well, I didn't think anything of it really. I didn't contemplate it too much. I just went back to my book. And then the cushion on next to me, because the sofa that I was sitting on had two main cushions instead of three. Maybe it had three. I think that one only had two. It was more like a love seat. And I was sitting on one, and the cushion immediately next to me indented, like someone had sat down. And I kind of didn't really know what to do. I just sort of looked at it like, this is really bizarre. And the weirdest, aura sort of settled around me. It was like I was straddling dimensions. Like, part of me was in the normal world that I live in, and part of me was somewhere else that was on top of where I was, but not where I was, if that makes sense. It was just a strange feeling. If you've experienced this, then you probably know what I'm talking about, and you also know that it's impossible to explain. But it just felt otherworldly. It felt really surreal. And all of a sudden, next to me, I hear clanking, like somebody has a teacup and a saucer. So I didn't feel threatened or anything. It was kind of interesting, but I was just sort of like, what is going on? And so I'm sitting there and I'm listening to this woman next to me have a full conversation facing away from my ear because she was talking to someone next to her, to the left of her, because she was to the left of me. I couldn't see this person. I just knew they were there by the indentation on the seat, on the cushion, and just chit-chatting away. I could hear a party, quiet clanking and chatting and things like that. I had, just sort of found myself in this invisible party. I smelled rose and I smelled all these teas that I had never really smelled before, and I thought, it was kind of lovely, but it was really, really weird at the same time. And this woman was talking to the person next to her, whoever it was, and saying, I just love this girl, don't you? And then the voice sort of, you know how you can tell when someone's like speaking to you as opposed to away from you? And all of a sudden the voice turns to me and goes, you are truly a delight. And everything disappeared. Like, just disappeared and went straight back to normal. And it was really bizarre. And yeah, it was sort of like a paranormal hangover after that, because I was just like, what in the world just happened? The weirdest part, though, was something I noticed later, because my mom actually collects, I wouldn't say collects, she doesn't like clutter, but she has a small collection of antique teacups and saucers. Sorry if you can hear that helicopter in the background. And she has them all very, perfectly aligned and set up in like a cabinet, like a China hut, or whatever you call it, China cabinet, you know what I'm saying. Anyway, and so I was walking past that right after this happened, because I was like, okay, I'm gonna change rooms. So I went into the kitchen, which is next to this dining room, to get water. And I was walking past it, and I noticed that one of the teacups was out of place, and I thought, that is very strange, because my mom is very particular, and we don't use those teacups, they're just for display, really. And so I moved it back to where it was supposed to be, and just went on with my life. But it was a very odd experience, and further confirms for me anyway that there is something very weird happening with this house. So that's tea time. So this is the last story that I'm going to tell you guys today, and this story is a glitch in the Matrix story, basically. So for those of you who like time slips, time warps, that kind of thing, you're gonna love this. So, it was Halloween. I was in middle school. I don't remember what grade, but I remember I was in middle school, and my friends and I had decided that we were going to go trick-or-treating in the neighborhood, like directly across the boulevard from us. So there's sort of like this neighborhood, the main neighborhood, and then we live in like the highlands of that neighborhood. So it's not really higher, it's just across the street. I don't know why they call it that, but anyway, it's sort of like a mini version of that neighborhood, but it's not great for trick-or-treating, so we decided to go across the boulevard. Obviously, we had an adult drop us off. There were way more kids over there, so it was a lot safer. And not that we live in a particularly dangerous area, but just the parents all felt safer. It was close to our elementary school that we had gone to previously, so, it was just a familiar area for everybody. So my friend's mom picks us up, picks me up anyway, and one other girl, and we go over to this neighborhood, because that's where they lived. And so we start trick-or-treating. Everything's pretty normal. We're not pranksters or anything like that. We were like good kids, like goody two-shoes kind of. Probably, I was like Hermione Granger, but Hermione didn't exist yet. But I'm sure I would have been teased as Hermione if Harry Potter had existed at the time, because I was very much that kid. But I was kind of sort of approaching a slightly rebellious stage, but like nothing crazy, just, a middle schooler, but not like, I was still really good compared to most middle schoolers that I was like going to school with or whatever. So but my friends and I were kind of like the quiet ones. We didn't like to make a lot of trouble. We just wanted to go trick-or-treating and get home, So we had been trick-or-treating for maybe an hour, and we came up to this house, and I just got the weirdest feeling. And my guy friend who was with me said, oh, let's go to this house, because I hear they give out like king-size candy bars, like the good stuff. And I don't really know what it was about the place, but it just spooked me. And I said, no, I said, that's okay, you go on ahead and I'll stay here. I don't need a king size candy bar, like we're good. I'll wait for you. So I was at the corner and there were cars going by, like not super busy, but like a residential neighborhood, you know, in the suburbs, there's always people coming and going, especially on Halloween. There were tons of kids all over the place, and so I felt perfectly safe standing there on the corner, because the house was on the corner, and just waiting for them to run to the door, get their candy, and come back. So I was standing there, and I kind of turned away from the house, just to sort of, you know, people watch, I guess, while they were getting their candy. And all of a sudden, as I turned, there were no people, there were no cars at all, and it was just empty. Like, it was the same neighborhood, but it was just empty. And I was super freaked out because I was like, you know, what in the world happened? Like, if it had just been us on the street and it was empty, I would have just assumed they were hiding from me or something. But everything, like the wind stopped blowing, like everything was just still and silent, and I was just the only one there, and it was so bizarre. And I kind of turned back to the house, expecting obviously to see my friends so I could be like, hey, isn't this weird? And when I turned back, my friends were not there, and so then I kind of really started to panic a little bit. But when I looked back at the house, there was this old woman standing there with a long black hair and a long black dress and with long black sleeves, just dressed completely in black, and she just stared at me, and I thought this was just the creepiest thing in the world. And as she's staring at me, she raises one hand with like a pointy finger, and right as she gets to like her hand being leveled in front of her, you know, like to point to me, I turned to book it because I was gonna run. I was like, I'm not sticking around to figure out what she's doing. And so I turned to run, and I started running, and I ran headlong into my friend. And in that instant, everything went back to normal. And I was like, dude, like, what in the world just happened? And he was like, what is wrong with you? And I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, we've been standing here for 4 minutes trying to get your attention, and you were just standing staring into nothingness. And I was like, no, I was standing here on the corner trying to figure out why nobody was here. And I was like, it wasn't 4 minutes. That whole thing probably took, I don't know, 40 seconds. And so I was like, no, it was just a few seconds. I was like, where'd you guys go? And he was like, we've been standing here for 4 solid minutes trying to get you to like move. But apparently I was just standing there staring into nothingness when I, to my recollection, was not. So it was just a really weird sort of time slip thing that happened, and yeah, it was just a very scary experience, and we just moved on with it and never really talked about it again. But that persists as one of the most bizarre Halloweens on record so far, and I kind of hope that it continues to be the weirdest Halloween I've ever had, because that was weird. Well, thank you guys for joining me on a trip down memory lane to some of the weird things that have happened in this house and in my life. I know some of them sound totally crazy, but I swear that they are all true. I've had a lot more experiences like that I'm happy to share with you guys if you like this style of video. If you're not really into the story time type of video and you'd rather just, you know, go back to the regular ones, that's cool too. But if most of you seem to like this, then I'll make a part 2. And I have some Let's Not Meet stories as well, but those are a little darker, so let me know if you're up for those. But yeah, so that is this set of stories. I hope you guys really enjoyed it. If you do like the content on my channel, obviously feel free to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss anything. And yeah, I am currently working on October's project, which as I mentioned, I will make a video about. So yes, there will be sporadic posts here and there, maybe a few times a week if I can, and then as we approach October they should be more consistent. But you guys are going to be really excited about October, and I can't wait to make that little short update video and let you guys know what's going on. So, thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.